always, you may remember me from such sessions as the 166th and the 165th. And if not, hi, I'm Tara. Nice to make your acquaintance. And I'll be chairing this evening's debate. So before we get started, I'd like to welcome Mr. Robbie Whitehurst to read the minutes from last week's debate.
You may have noticed my casual attire this evening. 2 formals in 2 days was not the best idea for me. Listen guys, please. You're lucky I have the minutes, alright? Be thankful. Good evening, one and all. The Duffering competition for Speaker of the Year. He wants to update.
This is why you write the minutes. Just saying.
The annual Duffering competition for Speaker of the Year took place in the Senate Room on the 21st of April and was attended by 23 members. Prime Member's business was heard from Mr. Johnny Finlay, who proposed that we wish our righteous and glorious monarch, Queen Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor II, a very happy 90th birthday on behalf of the Litterific. However, in solidarity with the NUS, Mr. Whitehurst proposed that instead of commemorating one specific occasion, we should instead congratulate every monarch in the world today who has experienced a birthday in the past 12 months. The motion was passed. President's questions were heard from Messrs. Mulholland, Chadwick and Devlin concerning breakfast, hair and the pub, respectively. President Senate then announced the evening's motion that this House would put God on trial. Opening for the proposition was Mr. Finbar Rogers, who asked if we can put Nazis on trial, why not God? Adding that a plague of locusts was effectively tantamount to chemical warfare. He claimed that the Judeo-Christian God is effectively a politician or a head of state and should be put to trial, as no individual in a position of power should be above the law. Opening for the opposition was Mr. Graham Rice, /Alexander, we don't really know. He asserted that God is naturally not of this world and it would be a fruitless exercise to try and put him on trial, proposing questions such as, how would he get here? How would he take the dock? And how can we restrain him? All adequate questions we should ask on occasion. He concluded by warning that if God was not convicted, it would set a dangerous precedent for future trials. Continuing with the proposition was Mr. Henry Adair, who claimed that God was an office and not an individual, which means that he can face conviction. However, at this point, he decided to mention Kim Kardashian in a debate about God, so all his remaining points are stricken from the minutes. Continuing with the opposition was Mr. Jonathan Finlay, who asserted that it would be wrong to trial God, as the laws which he would allegedly be violating did not exist during his active period, and it would be unjust to trial him for this reason. Furthermore, he claimed that we have no way of punishing a convicted God, such as fines, prison sentences, and the death sentence would all be ineffectual. Speaking thirdly of the proposition was Mr. Kerrigan Van Blanken, who immediately disposed the idea of an official judicial trial, as it would be impossible to convict an omnipotent entity, as he instead proposed a mock trial, which would allow society as a whole to come to a decision and a conclusion without the complication of exacting punishment upon the unpunishable. He claimed that the very idea of God inspires injustice and clash, and that holding a mock trial would allow us to hold God accountable for his actions. Continuing with the opposition was Mr. Jamie Muller. He asserted that there is no definitive proof that God has broken our laws, and therefore we have no way to pass conviction. He asserted that without any real evidence, a trial would not only be pointless, but it would bring into question society's conception of morality as a whole. Concluding with the proposition was Mrs. Gemma Canham, who supported her partner's idea that we should have a mock trial for the idea of God. She wrapped up her team's arguments by stating that opposition had been attempting to prove the existence of God when it demonstrably wasn't necessary. Meanwhile, the opening proposition had been going round in circles, finding just who God was. And concluding the opposition and so the debate was Mr. Peter Dunn, who refuted the idea that we wouldn't need to assume God's existence to put him on trial. Indeed, he also stated that if God's existence is taken as a given, we may have no right to put him on trial, as he created us in the first place, and his morality should be taken as final. During deliberations, questions were heard from Andrew Dillon, Richie Gallagher, Aisha Sobey and Kerrigan Van Blanken. A vote based on House personal opinion was taken, which read 5 ayes, 10 nays and 4 abstentions. Meanwhile, a casting vote based on Speaker's performance was taken, which read 2 ayes, 7 nays and 9 abstentions. After much deliberations, judges Senna, McNally and Mulholland concluded that the recipient of the Duffering Medal for Speaker of the Year for 2016 would be Mr. Kerrigan Van Blanken. Can I take the minutes as read? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. directors. Okay, so there's just a few announcements. The first one is, as many of you know, our conversazione was on Tuesday, also known as our formal, but with a more pretentious name. Thanks to all of you who attended. It was a really good night. Marguerite's want to say thank you as well. And we hope you really enjoyed it, and everyone who wasn't there are, of course, disowned by the society. And the other thing is we need speakers for next week. It's a mock debate, and we need speakers to represent every what? Political party, yes,
In Northern Ireland.
in Northern Ireland.
Oh.
So if you're interested in that, like, get in touch with Mary-Louise. Yes?
Also, if you've got any questions that you
Finn.
any questions that you potentially want to put to the representatives of the party, just let me know.
Okay, do that. And yeah, that's all of the announcements I have, unless Kenchel has any other ones. Nope. Okay. And next thing is private members' business, which we have one bit of private members' business.
Oh yes, hopefully more successful than last week's motion by me. I, under duress, would like to move that the House congratulate Miss Gemma Cannon on her new bag. Gemma, show it to the House for everyone who's looking up at it. No longer available at a store near you.
Do we have any questions on this motion? No, can we go to a vote then? Or does anybody want to vote against it? No, right, so, oh, yes, go ahead.
Excuse me, I have a question on the merits of congratulating someone for just spending money to get something. Is that a question that you...
Would anybody like to explain?
Then you question the foundations of our society.
Okay, so any other points on that? No? Shall we go to a vote? Everyone who wants to congratulate Gemma, please raise your hands and say aye. And everybody who thinks that this is not a very good use of our time, please say nay. I mean, I don't know which side won that, because you didn't all raise your hands.
I am...
Let's just say that it passed because we're a really nice society. Congratulations, Gemma. Okay, is there any other private members' business? Anyone want to speak up? Yes, fine.
I just had to wish I was a happy at balls day.
I have not missed this job. Yes.
I'll second that.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, do you mind if we go on to the new motion, or do you want us to really go through it?
I'd like to go through your happy at balls day.
I wanted to see what Craig has to say. It'd be nice to kickstart the
Just a moment, Ben. Craig, would you like to comment
I'm
on it?
happy to celebrate Happy Ed Balls Day, to be honest with you.
Okay, that's great.
Here we go. He's motivated.
Ben!
Ben Livingston, what's the deal there? I'm just trying to gauge. What's the deal?
I don't think this is going down a good path,
I
so
think
any other private member business? Any?
Smart move.
No? Okay. And so the next part is President's Question Time. Basically, you can ask me or any other member of the council any question. Yeah.
Madam President Emeritus, is it good to be back at the Litter Effort?
I mean, I've been at the Litter Effort.
Chairing a debate at the Litter Effort.
I mean, I hope we answered that at the end of the night, because if I start with a negativity, that's going to follow me. The whole thing. Any other questions?
Is that not a negativity?
For me, that is positivity. You clearly don't know me that well. Yes.
What did you have for breakfast?
Good question.
Great question. Good question.
I had avocado with a side of bacon and eggs on top of burgers with chips.
That was breakfast.
Yeah, it was breakfast. Anyway, any questions? Okay, let's see that there's no more. And so let's go go over the rules very quickly. As you know, the speeches are 7 minutes long. The first and last minute are protected, meaning you can't ask any questions during that time. You'll know that you can ask a question when I clap my hands because I don't have a bell. And if you would like to ask the speaker a question, you have to stand up and say it on that point. It's up to the speaker whether they take your question or not. If they want to, please make it brief, no longer than 10 seconds. And once the speaker has responded, another question can't just be asked straight afterwards. So they have to get back into the rhythm of their speech before another point of information can be made. Or else you will get shouts of no barking, which you don't want, because then I might fine you, and that's a bottle of port that you have to bring next week, and you really don't want that to happen. Or maybe you do, because you've got lots of money, I don't know. The next thing is, just to remind everyone to be respectful during this debate. You can, of course, talk about religion, but if you are going on any kind of dodgy tangent, you're going to be stopped and fined.
Can I just take my fine now, please?
Craig, I really don't like that attitude from you especially.
Can I give a motion that there's a maximum fine of like 5 bottles of port?
Not for
Like,
you.
help me out here.
I'm not passing it on.
Can I get it seconded by anyone?
Democracy, man.
Okay, so everyone who thinks that the maximum fine to one person can't be over 5 bottles of port, please say aye and raise your hands. And everybody who thinks that that's just stupid, please say no. Oh, it doesn't pass. Please just make your speech not offensive. It can't be that hard. Okay, so guys, chill. There'll be time for this later. So we might as well move on. So the debate tonight is this House withdraw Mohammed. So I would like to welcome our first speaker for the proposition, Mr. Musa.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming along to what I'm sure is going to be a very lively debate. Given the controversial nature of tonight's debate, I feel it is important to give a clear definition of the motion, the direction in which it is to be discussed, and that my name is Mohammed. The motion tonight is whether the House would draw the Prophet Muhammad. By this we mean as a mechanism to express free thought. This is not a debate on the scriptural contentions of whether this is allowed or not, and nor is it an attack on Islam specifically. Drawing the Prophet Muhammad is simply the most relevant and potent example of religion stifling expression in the modern day. The motion should be discussed solely from what this stifling of expression represents as an instrument, and not what relationship implications of drawing the Prophet would have on Western Islamic relations and social cohesion. I will perform a little exercise as to why freedom of expression should not be curtailed, and then Kieran will expand and discuss why offence cannot be a consideration in compromising on free expression, and Richie will explain why it is wrong that fear is a mitigating factor in the restriction of freedom of expression. Asians are good at maths. Are you offended yet?
Okay.
Black people run fast. Are you offended yet? Fat people should not be allowed to use the NHS. Anyone offended yet?
Questions already.
Burqas should be banned because the wearer might be hiding a bomb. Anyone? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so we've got one. I'm going to move it up a little bit. God hates fags. Anyone offended? A woman's best place is in the kitchen or on her back. Who's offended?
I was thinking that.
Oh, right, we've got a couple. The Irish famine wasn't as big a deal as you guys make. 2 more. Black people in Africa are closer to monkeys than humans. And here's the problem. Hitler was a Zionist. At what point in that series of statements should I have been silenced for how offensive I was? Which one?
Or not.
That's not a rhetorical question. Yeah, go ahead, you can answer it.
On that point, sir, who exactly is silencing you, if not yourself because of society's expectations? And as you said, it happens all of the time. So why are you going to draw this arbitrary line here when it happens all of the time?
I'm asking you, I think you just made my point for me. I'm asking, where is that line? So when you're saying that we can't draw the Prophet Muhammad, you are drawing that line. My argument is that no line should be drawn. I at no point incited someone to violence or racial hatred. What opposition is proposing is that incitement laws should no longer be the upper bound of freedom of expression. And what I want to know is who chooses that interest? Who will be the supreme moral arbiter of society? Craig? We laugh here, but that is the exact issue. There is no quantifiable level of obnoxiousness that we can all agree should not be surpassed. I actually believe in every one of those statements. Is that what makes it offensive? We are all here because we enjoy intelligent debate. We question, we formulate arguments, and we present them. We do not concede to the status quo as a given. And now it's time to hit you over the head of the token cliche of this debate. You do not have a right not to be offended. You have a right to challenge someone's speech and expression, not limit it. You have a right to expose the obnoxiousness for what it is. Many of you know that I am not religious, and I'm sure that does shape my view on the matter, but only into that. My belief in freedom of expression is only limited by incitement. And isn't that the crux of this motion? That we seek to stop someone drawing a picture because the party offended is a prisoner of the restriction that the religion puts on them. I no longer even have to believe in a religion to have it curtail my freedom of thought. Your magical, omnipotent, all-loving, wonder fairy must now restrict what I can draw. You guys offended? The question we, the proposition, propose to you this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is will you be custodian by a 1400-year Chinese whisper? Will you let it force your hand? We just grew a Muhammad. Will you? Thanks very much.
Thank you, and now I'd welcome Mr. Carvin Van Banken to open for the opposition.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we on the opposition bench actually agree with quite some things that were said on proposition. We, for example, believe that freedom of expression, freedom of speech is one of the essential, most important things in our society. However, in contrast to what a government is trying to tell you, we are actually also convinced that with great power, and we also think that free speech gives a person great power, and that, to quote a movie, great power gives you great responsibility. And we think that it is our duty to use that great responsibility in the most sensible way that we can in order to provide the most productive discourse and to provide the best society. What I'm going to do in my speech is prove three things. First of all, I'm going to prove that our stance is perfectly compatible with freedom of speech. Secondly, I'm going to prove to you that we give more importance to freedom of speech than government actually does. Thirdly, we're going to argue that we create a more pleasant world, and actually a world in which promotion of freedom of speech is the most benefit. Right? We think there's one misapprehension on the government side as to what case we're going to argue, right? We're not going to argue any sort of legal limitations that we're going to legally limit anyone from drawing the Prophet Muhammad, right? That is not the motion that is being discussed. The motion that would have been discussed then is like, this House would not impose any legal restrictions on the drawing of Muhammad. Rather, the motion is, this House would draw Muhammad. We are going to say that this house, as being a sort of rational human being, actually should not want to draw Muhammad. We think that the rational human being that we mean this house to be should actually think for himself and should use the moral consideration, the personal moral consideration, not to draw. So first of all, why is this totally compatible with free speech? There is no law limiting me from holding a 7-minute rant at this moment, insulting every single person on the council, insulting every single person in this room, several times over, insulting their extended family. Yet, I probably will not do, right? First of all, because this makes me a bad person, right? It's probably, none of you would really like me if I were actually to do this. Probably a lot of people would be rather offended if I started talking trash about your mother. Second of all, it also probably wouldn't be productive, right? Because if I started insulting government bench, they would start insulting me, and rather than have a productive discussion on this motion, it would result into some giant fistfight. So we think actually in day-to-day life, as my colleague has already said, we already limit our freedom of speech quite a bit. There are some things we do not say, not just because someone is imposing us not to say them, but because we morally deem it not right to just offend a person, right? As David Hume said, we humans are not beings who would like to go out of their ways to step on someone's gouty toes. Yes, I'll take it.
The motion implies that we would, as a matter of principle, we would not have our right to draw Mohammed being curtailed. And you are discussing it just in terms of being polite.
No, I'm going to come to that, because I would, as a matter of principle, also not draw. Right? And now I'm going to talk a bit about the nature of these cartoons and their intended audiences and their implicit message and how this is used, right? Because we see already the same sort of narrative that is coming from government, that the nature of these cartoons is highly reactionary, right? There has been an attack, and which is claimed by a Muslim fundamentalist group, and suddenly it is, for example, in Charlie Hebdo, which was quite explicitly about freedom of speech, and as a reactionary movement, you see these cartoons about Muhammad appearing with a very explicit message that we do not care about what you do to us, we stand up for our right to defend, or for our right to freedom of speech, and our symbol of freedom of speech is going to be Muhammad. We think this is a very badly chosen symbol to mean freedom of speech, right? Because what this is, the message in this cartoon and the implicit audience of this cartoon is not the newspaper readers who pick up the Charlie Hebdo. It's far more wider than that. It's actually implicitly wanting to try to send a signal to the wider Muslim community, even though people have generally don't really have a clue about who actually the wider Muslim community exists of, which part of the wider Muslim community would actually resort to violence if they're offended, right? We think they're categorizing a very large broad group, a very large group that will be offended by this as well, right? And then we get government saying that offense and social relations should not enter into this. We think it actually does not. Please sit down. Because the reason that these things are very provocative and very offensive is because they're meant to be provocative. They're meant to be offensive to a large group of people. And we say actually that in a world where you're saying this is freedom of speech, we mean freedom of speech as being this, and our symbol of freedom of speech is something that is highly offensive to you because we want you to accept freedom of speech. This is not how you get people to accept freedom of speech. If you put that explicit link in their mind, freedom of speech means us putting this highly controversial, highly provocative, and offensive image for you, and putting that out and constantly confronting you with this. This is not going to make those people suddenly accept, oh right, yeah, freedom of speech is actually a good thing, right? This is actually going... No, please sit. This is actually going to alienate a lot of people from this entire idea of freedom of speech if they constantly have to associate it with something that is very close to them and something that offends them at a very deep identity level. Right? We think there's actually a number of very bad consequences to this that government side is overlooking. Right? They're first of all less likely to listen to you if you're just going to knock down their door with a very offensive image. Secondly, they're less likely to accept the entire freedom of speech when freedom of speech is ultimately in their mind bound up with these very offensive imagery. Thirdly, they're less likely to engage with you in further discussions, first of all, because they are already expecting you to do the same thing over again to be offensive to them even before you've done anything. Fourth of all, it is crowding out all other options which are much more sensible to discuss freedom of speech with other people. It's much more sensible to discuss Muslim fundamentalism with other people. It's much more productive to discuss freedom of speech with other people if you're not, first of all, as a very first act, trying to insult them, trying to offend them. We've probably seen that people are far less likely to listen, but because we are using this particular imagery that is offensive to them, we're already crowding out these other options because people aren't really going to be bothered to listen if they expect to be offended, right? And government is just trying to ignore the entire thing of people being offended as just, well, suck it up. But to a lot of people in the world, religion means something so deeply fundamental to them that if you insult the Prophet Muhammad, you insult their very deep them at a very deep personal level, you take away their entire identity. So it's fairly reasonable that those people don't want to listen to you. No, please sit down. So overall, we actually see that taking a sensible approach, putting some kind of self-criticism and looking at what you actually say to people and using the responsibility of freedom of speech in the most responsible way as possible, we can actually create a more pleasant world where people are actually more likely to listen to each other, and which actually is better at promoting free speech than if you're using this kind of imagery to convey these same thoughts. We actually think that freedom of speech gives you great responsibility as well, and that this house would not draw Muhammad on the basis of that alone. Thank you.
Would you like to come back to be secretary as opposed to doorman? That's disturbing on so many levels. Okay, thank you for that speech, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Kieran Gallagher to continue for the proposition.
Thank you, Madam. What's your position again?
President Emeritus.
President Emeritus. Emeritus. Ladies and gentlemen, and those of a non-binary nature of the House, thank you very much for this. Just in response to one of the last things we heard, I think either you can deal with the risks of free expression, which on this side of the House we would argue vastly outweighed rather by the benefits, or you cannot. I don't think there's really that much of a wiggle room here. And what sounds like the more adult thing to do, either to simply argue back fiercely if necessary, or shut the argument down. We'll get on to that. As has already been said, we're not claiming that we should draw Muhammad. We're simply saying we would, as First Prop has already said. I remind the House as well that reasons or intentions behind a wish to draw Muhammad are not necessarily or inherently malicious. People actually challenged me earlier this week to draw a stick figure of Muhammad in the run-up to this debate if I was worth my own weight of salt. And I think this actually misses the point, though I did one anyway, which I'll reveal at the end. It's not the same as saying we will do it either. We're simply saying that we don't rule out as an absolute law the fact that maybe there could be a scenario in which it might be appropriate, it might even be beneficial. What that is, I don't know, and I don't even need to know.
On that point, sir.
Am I the first minute? Okay, I'll take it.
That's not what this debate is. This debate isn't. In some situations, we might find it appropriate to draw the line. No, this is we as a society would do that thing. That's what you're arguing, sir.
I disagree. Moving on. Anyway, so I'm basically here to talk to you about the compromise of freedom of expression. Now, let's say we did agree that the drawing of this particular prophet should be a complete social taboo, because the potential offence might be too acute. Too many people's feelings may be hurt, and this would overwhelm any possible benefit to its audience. The question is, what's next? Aren't you in potentia creating a rod for your own back? How far are you willing to compromise here? If you draw the line of offence, if you use that as a criteria, there will always be someone offended by something when we reach the new standard in the next generation. And what is offensive is redefined in itself every generation. Just think what would have been offensive 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or even 100 years ago. This is the inevitable problem with censorship. You will sooner or later always find yourself on the other side, being the one trying to express something that you think is important, but it is unsayable because it might offend some people. Yes, go ahead.
Can you think of other ways in which you, for example, might promote freedom of speech without offending someone?
Without
offending someone?
Yes, but as I've already said, this isn't necessarily offensive. Almost anything you could say will offend someone somewhere else in the world. It also is worth bearing in mind people who have genuine grievances and people, and I'm sure we all know it, I'm not saying this is something exclusive to the world of Islam, but on the internet we've all come across people who seek offence as well. I won't go into that because I don't have time, but as I was saying, it is one of the incessant difficulties of a free society. It's the price we pay. How do you constitute a valid offence? And the way we find out is via talks like this, with the promise of a fresh talk if necessary later. Now, here's the other question. Where did, and I haven't actually heard it come up yet, I hope it is readdressed, where did we get the idea that drawing Muhammad is offensive to Muslims? When did you first get that impression? Was it because you heard of the Danish cartoons? Was it Charlie Hebdo? Was it, perhaps it's not a cartoon obviously, but Salman Rushdie's book? Now, are we not at least in danger of lumping all Muslims together by saying they are represented by the most intolerant members of those demographic, the ones who do take guns to the offices of a magazine and gun people down for the crime of satire?
On that,
Okay.
I don't think the people who take guns to the office of a magazine are the entire category of Muslims who would be offended by such an action.
Yep, no, I was about to say that. No, of course, I do acknowledge, of course, there are also peaceful Muslims who... No, listen. I acknowledge that, of course, that the majority of the Muslim world is a peaceful one. I didn't want to have to say that, but there it is. Everyone in the room knows that, I'm sure. At least I hope you do. In any case, sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. Where was I? Yes, no, of course there are Muslims who do not condone or do not partake in violence who are offended to either a small degree or to a very serious degree by depictions of Muhammad. But it isn't all of them, ladies and gentlemen. You don't lump them all together, and certainly don't let the extremists on the fringe of the Muslim world be the tail that wags the whole dog. Yep.
You are the one letting the extremists on the fringes let you offend 1.6 billion people. Your argument is contradictory.
But you're saying I would be offending 1.6 people. Sorry, 1.6 billion people, beg your pardon. Why do we think that? Maybe even the majority of them are offended by it. Doesn't mean all of them are. Doesn't either mean necessarily that's a particularly valid offence. That's another argument. But where was I? Yeah, we don't take lessons from those people. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to move on. I don't have time. How much time do I have, by the way, now?
20 seconds.
20 seconds, fantastic. Right, okay, I'll just wrap up in this case. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, what we're actually discussing tonight are examples of satire that many of us have not seen, and that probably most of the Muslim world have not seen. In fact, the fact that we're discussing drawing Muhammad tonight, we're discussing an image that doesn't even exist yet. In playground terms, this word is crying before you're hurt. Let's decide for ourselves what is offensive. We don't need to have it dictated to us by particularly intolerant, nasty people. And, oh yes, seeing as I have run out of time, I wish I had more time to discuss this, but here is my depiction of the Prophet Muhammad. I hope you all enjoy it. Take care.
Thank you for that speech, and I'd like to welcome Sally Walker to continue for the office.
Before I start, can we all please acknowledge that Scruffy just pulled a Donald Trump, and some, I assume, are good people, just in relation to Islam? Ladies and gentlemen, our Draw Muhammad contest is not a frivolized exercise of sacrilege against a minority religion. It's a defense of what is at the core of a society of freedom, tolerance, and equal rights. If we cannot defend that with a full throat, we deserve to choke on whatever jihadists of all stripes can force down our throats. Doesn't that just make you so angry? Doesn't it story. It's the story that the proposition are either telling tonight or relying on because it's the story that our society is saying. And you have to realize that there's a bad guy and a good guy in the story, and we're the good guys, and they're the bad guys. The terrorists are the bad guys. And whatever way you will vote at the end of the night is because of the story that you choose to find yourself in. Let's deconstruct that. I've got 3 points tonight. The first is freedom of speech. The second, the obligation to offend. And the third, defeating the terrorists. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that straw man that you built at the very beginning there about how the good bad guys and the bad guys.
Could you just make it a bit faster, sorry?
Yeah, it's a logical fallacy. You're trying to assume why we're making a decision. We're making a decision on freedom of speech. It's nothing to do with good bad guys.
Okay, thank you very much. I will get to it. I'm just saying that in our society, that is the mentality of speaking in this way brings. I'm sorry, there's so much to say. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom of speech, as we've already said, this debate is not about law. It's not about making things illegal. But we do limit ourselves in every way, and as I said to Mo, we've got so many things that we seem to draw this line on that we don't speak about because our society says it's not right to speak about that. But when I asked about drawing the line, it was why are we today drawing this line on drawing the Prophet Muhammad? Because that is where we are saying that no, we're not allowed to be censored, we're not allowed to self-censor in this way. And we are drawing that artificial line here when we self-censor on everything all the time. Yes, sir?
Yeah, but we're talking on an individual level here. Any of those points, I don't have to self-censor. What you're saying is that all of us here should blanket censor on this point. So yes, there might be certain areas in society where we do self-censor, but it's not as a rule. And you, right out here, are creating a rule that none of us can draw.
No, sir, I'm not creating a rule. I'm saying that although you've said that this debate is the singular, it's the we, it's the I would not draw Muhammad, we are making a decision as a house. So it's we would not draw Muhammad. And in this situation, the house is society. And it's we as a society would not do this thing. And we as a society do not say things all the time. There are so many offensive things you said at the start of the speech that we don't do because we don't self-censor in that way. So this is just one more thing that we're not going to do. It's artificial. So this isn't actually an attack on freedom of speech because we limit ourselves in freedom of speech all of the time. There is no attack. We do it all the time. So if we all self-censor, we get to this kind of obligation to offend that we've grown out of this freedom, that if we have the freedom of speech, then we therefore have this kind of obligation that because we can offend, that we should offend in this way to defend the fact that our freedom of speech is being taken away, even though it's not.
On that point?
Yes, sir.
Well, evidently there is a special context for this, considering violence has been used against those who are drawing these images. So while they may not be tasteful, certainly there is in it an external attack on our ability to express ourselves.
Yes, we'll get to that. But let's just look, we will get to violence in this context and the extra motivations it would bring about. But let's just look at it in the way that the proposition have and just on freedom of speech itself. So what is the offensive thing here? The reason that I'm so thirsty, the reason that Muslims are being offended, thank you very much, in this way is because of the prohibition of idolatry. Right? It's not a big deal. It's not about the principle itself because it's in Protestantism. Who knew that? That's why that exists. The point is, why? Why do you have this obligation to defend? It's not about defending freedom of speech because that's not being attacked right now, right? And you're not standing for any of the values at the start of this speech about freedom and tolerance and equal rights. You're not actually attacking Islam on any kind of valid point that's worthy of criticism.
On that point?
No, thank you, sir. So why are you actually doing it? Is it to stick it to the terrorists? Because the terrorists make up 0.001% of the Muslim population. So you're either completely naive, or you don't understand that you have to offend 1.6 billion people to get to them, or you don't care about offending those people, or more likely, it is about those people. Because although the proposition has said that this isn't about society, it's not about a clash of cultures, and it's not about... Just because you say it doesn't make it true, because that is the actual reality of what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. So you are actually offending a huge population on purpose, backed up by the fact that I have the freedom to do that, and you should get over it. Ladies and gentlemen, no thank you, sir, that is where we talk about principles like tolerance and freedom and equal rights, because when you make it about the actual Muslim population and about us, then we get our us-them divides here. That's what I was talking about. Because when the target is the them, is Islam, and we are the Western values. It has to be us and them. And what you are doing, what you are reduced to, is intentionally causing, oh my God, emotional distress on another population, and in this country, a minority population, intentionally causing them distress, so that you can be part of the bigger narrative, the good guy. You're essentially a bully, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what you're reduced to. Because you're not doing it on any kind of principle, you're doing it to feel better about yourself and putting others down. Ladies and gentlemen, as Scruffy said, the only reason that you know about this at all is because people told you. The only two people who want you to draw the Prophet Muhammad are people who hate Muslims and terrorists who want you to hate Muslims because they want some kind of us, them, or Tartagon. Ladies and gentlemen, it feeds into societal racism. It actually helps to recruit people into terrorist activities, because when you have disillusioned people who are being discriminated against, no thank you sir, when they're being discriminated against and pushed away in a society, it's really, really, really easy to get them into terrorist groups. I've got no time at all. Into terrorist groups, because the one thing that terrorist groups actually have in common around the world is that they're all about a sense of justice, and if they feel like they're being treated unjustly, that's why they go into terrorism, all the religious stuff on top of that. But ladies and gentlemen, this idea that because violence is there and that we're standing up to violence, you're treating this symptom of this big cause that you're feeding into, because as long as you are still dividing and engaging in racism and hurting people and driving them away and driving them into terrorism and making them attack again, it's like you're putting a bandage on a wound and you're fucking stabbing into the wound because you don't understand how the system works. I'm sorry. There'll be a bottle of port, there'll be a bag of wine. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say all over the shop, I've been debating like 2 years, give me a break. What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, is that this doesn't solve anything. You're not standing on any kind of rock of freedom of speech. It's not there, you don't have a foundation, and all you're doing is hurting people intentionally in the process and making the problem worse. Ladies and gentlemen, vote no.
Walker, and please bring your fine next week. And now I'd like to welcome Mr. Richard Gallagher to propose for proposition.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for coming today. No doubt at the small, what if history is to be understood, reasonable risk to your life. So the majority of this is probably going to be rebuttals, which I didn't really anticipate, but it's been that sort of debate. So first of all, in response to this idea that all Muslims are somehow a homogenized people who are all offended, there is 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, yes, but saying that what we offend, that we offend them all is a bit like saying working on a Sunday offends all Christians. It's not true. Muslims are not a homogenized people. If you say that the drawing of Muhammad offends Muslims and you lump them to get all together, you immediately grant that they are, in fact, represented by the most extreme, homicidal, fanatical, intolerant people, and that they are all so insecure in their faith that a cartoon offends them. That is not true, and is surely an insult to Muslims. Another rebuttal for the first speaker. I guess still protected, is it? No. Sorry, I have to get through this. You're saying freedom of speech comes with responsibility. I don't think it does. There is a responsibility not to respond to offensive material, however, with threats or violence. That is a responsibility you have. That responsibility is protected by law and laws that already exist.
On that point, sir.
Sorry. Okay, so it is ridiculous to say that we can say whatever we like, whenever we like. We cannot. There's restrictions on freedom of speech, even outside of the religious sphere, which is why we have defamation laws, libel laws. There are various factors as to how that we mitigate our freedom of speech. But the question is whether one of those mitigating factors should be feared. Make no mistake about it, the reason why we refrain from depicting Muhammad and why cartoons and magazine covers are pixelated in the media when depicting Muhammad is not for fear of causing offence. It is for fear of our lives. A tolerance of religious belief is not why the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art quietly removed all Ottoman Empire artifacts that depicted Muhammad. It was done out of fear. I will seek to prove to you this evening that drawing Muhammad is not a malicious act, but by refusing to accept fear as a mitigating factor for curtailing freedom of expression, it becomes a virtuous act. We need to end the taboo. It will end, but we have a responsibility to end it quicker. To stop empowering terrorists who are hell-bent on creating a conflict between religious ideology and the ideologies of freedom of expression, and in turn creating a desired conflict between Muslims and non-Muslims. We need to show that terrorism does not work, and by showing that death threats and acts of violence cause us to refrain from drawing Muhammad, and cause media outlets to refrain from showing depictions of Muhammad. That is clearly what we are doing. So what choices do we have? Well, one is to all agree to live under some sort or some element of Islamic blasphemy law, which I'm sure no one here actually wants to do. Or we can unanimously decide, us and the press, that in the words of Ayan Hirsi Ali, we spread the risk around. The free press in the free world needs to spread the risk around. The problem is that without an I am Spartacus moment, we cannot expect a single satirical magazine, news outlet, cartoonist, politician or author to fly the flag for freedom of speech and hold, in doing so, the line of all our freedoms. And make no mistake about it, every one of our freedoms is underpinned by this idea of freedom of expression that is more powerful than violence, that cannot be overemphasized. This is something that we should not be ashamed to say is non-negotiable. And no threat or act of violence is going to bring us to the negotiating table. Stop this ridiculous taboo, draw Muhammad, because the perpetuation of this taboo is an attempt to make the founder of Islam, Muhammad, immune from scrutiny and satire. And this needs to end. Sorry, go ahead.
The basis of our freedoms is not absolute freedom of speech, it's habeas corpus.
Okay, might be the basis, but it certainly underpins a lot of what we believe in our right to response to everything in our society.
On that point,
Okay, where was it? Okay, I said that this needs to end. The immunity of Muhammad needs to end because religion makes very large claims for itself. Islam in particular claims that it is this total solution of all human problems, and the sooner it is imposed on everyone, the better.
On that point, sir.
And that's, go ahead.
Do you not see that you're directly feeding into the us-them mentality? We are freedom of speech, even though it's so limited, and they are, Islam wants to take over the world. Those are the images that you're using in your speech, sir.
I'm not assuming that every Muslim is offended by a cartoon. That is insulting to Muslims, in my opinion. I'm not the one saying that. I'm saying that I'm going to come to that actually here in a second. So if it claims those things, then it needs to drop this immunity from criticism and satire and be open to criticism like other religions such as Christianity and Judaism. The prohibition of the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad is merely a guise of religious intolerance, when what it really is the attempt by Islam's most powerful adherents to shut down all criticism of religion and one religion only. Scrutiny of scrutiny of this ideology is so important because inside Muslim communities there are feminist Muslims, and this is back to your point, gay Muslims, ex-Muslims, liberal Muslims. There are dissenting voices upon whom the charge of blasphemy is used to silence and even kill. By refraining from depicting Muhammad, you are contributing to this form of intolerance and authoritarianism. That is why we plead with you to please back the motion that has been proposed tonight. Draw Muhammad. Thank you.
To close the debate.
I did have another speech, but after my 5 bottle excess, I'm going to actually close this debate properly. But I think we should drop the male-female divide in this house right now and just define us as Brexiters and Remainers. I think that's a far more important thing right now than that. But look, I think that in terms of a couple of points, proposition have talked about that the 1.6 billion Muslims in the world are not one homogenous group. That's correct. But every single one of them would say that by drawing Muhammad, you are basically engaging in idolatry. Okay? Every single one of them would say that. No, go on. Forget it.
No.
Now, look, the reality is that we should not be going down that route. We should not be going down a route where we actively try to offend people. I know I do it on a very regular basis, and I really enjoy it. But I was actually trying to teach my mother banter when I was in Israel about 3 days ago, and she, in 1 minute, and she didn't get it. She was like, "Why would you want to just upset people all the time?" And I was like, "Because I enjoy it." So basically, what I'm saying then is that my enjoyment and what I want to do is far more important than everybody else's feelings. And effectively, that is the way I go about living my life. So now I'm standing on this side trying to argue that that's not what we should be doing. No, yeah, go on.
Draw Muhammad, Craig. Right. No, my point would be, you said that all Muslims are offended. You're allowed to have pictures of the Prophet Muhammad in Iran. The Ottoman Empire, i.e. the last Islamic Caliphate, constantly had pictures of the Prophet Muhammad. This is a new thing which has come out from Wahhabi and Salafi Islam. You are allowed to do it, and you are comparing once again to them.
Okay, fine. I actually completely disagree with that point.
It's a fact. It's not a fact.
But the bottom line is, this debate is summed up very simply in a responsibilities versus a rights argument. Now, we have to be looking at our responsibilities alongside and coexisting with our rights. I'm going to just use the American guns constitution rights argument here, where they believe that they have a right to bear arms, but they have absolutely no responsibility over the actions that people who shouldn't be having them are going to live their life. So we have to basically be weighing up in every right that we have the responsibilities that come with that right. Does anyone in this room disagree with that?
Okay. Did you just compare actually drawing to loaded guns?
Yes, because they end up in a very similar situation in some aspects. So we have to be looking at the responsibilities that we have with the rights that we've got. We have to be improving. We have to show the importance of the rights that we have in our country, and it's a really important thing that we do. You cannot simply just say, I've got this, without looking at any of the repercussions. Now, I'm not saying...
On that point?
Yeah, go on.
Actually, in a lot of Western liberal societies, we do in fact have only liberty rights, which means you only have a right to do something, you don't actually have a legal responsibility to...
I know, that's exactly my point, right? And I feel that we should be having an element of responsibility with every single one of the rights that we've got. Now, I know some people in this room think, no, human rights are at the essence of it, of which free speech is one of them. But I fundamentally disagree with that point. I fundamentally believe that with every single right that we've got, we have to be having coexisting responsibilities.
On that point, sir?
Yeah.
Again, freedom of speech coming with responsibilities. I mean, it just doesn't. Like that's something that's so subjective.
It doesn't.
It's a subjective view. Yeah.
It doesn't exactly, and I believe that it should be. And this is essentially the point of this debate. And if you sum up the debate from where I'm sitting on this side of the table, it comes down to this one single point of responsibilities versus rights. And pretty much, if you take what we've been saying on this side versus what you've been saying on this side, you don't want any degree of censorship. You don't want to have any curtailment of what people are saying. We want people to accept the fact that when they say something, it comes with a degree of repercussion, and you should be thinking about what you're doing before you actually go and do it.
No,
it's fine. It's not bad.
it's not fine. Wait a few minutes.
So, the next point I want to make, and we've been speaking about extremism around this table so far tonight, is does having the freedom of speech that we want to have, does it make extremism worse or can it make extremism better? And in my opinion, what we're doing right now with having a blanket rule where we're allowed to offend people willy-nilly is not doing anyone any favours right now. Now, I'm not going to say we should be pandering to people, which I understand is where the proposition think we could be coming from. But I'm just going to use the Israel argument, and I'm really sorry to bring that up into this debate. Please bear with me. I know, but I was there over the weekend, and I hadn't been there for a fair bit of time. And basically, since things have been going on with a sort of evolving BDS movement, with what's been going on in England in terms of Hitler's now a Zionist, and that effectively what's gone on there is that the peace process has actually moved further away from where it ever was. So all that's happened with this sort of staunchness against Israel is that we've got to a situation which is far worse than we were 5-8 years ago. And I see your side of things getting to a similar point, where if we go, no, I'm going to offend you, it's my right, I'm going to carry on doing exactly what I'm doing, we're never going to get Islam to Mark II like we did with Christianity. Christianity Mark I went around with crusades trying to convert people. It did, that was fact. Islam essentially is doing a very similar thing right now. If we just go and offend you and carry on going down the route that you want to go down, it's never going to get us to this place where Islam Mark II exists, just like Christianity Mark II, and we're going to end up in a situation, a bit like what's going on in Israel, where we are so much further away from a peace deal, it's not going to benefit anyone in society. So I understand that you want to really keep this non-censorship, and I do, but we have to accept our responsibilities. If we go down that route, there are going to be serious repercussions. And we're at a point now in this world where we could easily go into World War III if we're not already there. Okay? And going down the I'm going to join Muhammad, I'm going to offend you, even if you believe that that's not the way it originally was and it's turned into that, the bottom line is society going to accept that as a way of going, even with a repercussion of what could end up in a far bigger situation? Surely we should basically say, actually, let's just come to some degree of compromise here. Let's accept the fact that we need to progress as a world together. And I say, let's not draw Muhammad.
Thank you to all our speakers tonight. We're just going to go to questions and points from the floor now. So whenever you're making your question or point, please stand up and either side can address it, but only one person from each side. Okay? You good with that? Good with that. So does anybody have any questions or points for the proposition? To the proposition? Yeah.
You've tried valiantly to define this motion as more or less the opposite of what it is. But the fact is, in these debates, a positive action is proposed. The proposition proposes it. The opposition opposes it. The proposition does not propose the negative of a different motion. This is not this house should drop Muhammad. This house would drop Muhammad. You haven't made the case. And especially Mo, actually. I know you were sort of setting up for them, but in your speech you didn't address why we should, only why we can.
So, you dropped in the word should there.
I know, I did the wrong section, I'm sorry. Sorry. It should be between, it's not between can and would.
If I may take that. No, I already got this. Would can be a conditional, and in this case it is. If someone asked me, would I like a threesome? It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pop into, it's not going to happen for me right away, nor does it mean that I'm going to just accept an offer any place, any time of anyone. I would like a threesome, but not right now, for example. What? Why? It would be fun.
Scruffy, for a person who's talking about the conditional, you've already drawn Muhammad in this debate. Like,
which
No back and forth.
that I think you'll find says
Guys! Play nicely, okay? Any questions for the opposition? Yeah.
I'd actually like to touch upon Craig's point at the end there. I would absolutely fundamentally agree with the relationship. I wouldn't say it's versus, but certainly the relationship between rights and responsibilities. And I would disagree with your point in saying we don't have responsibilities. because we do. Because if you misuse your free speech, it's called slander, which is a crime, which is, of course, feeling you're responsible for that right. But moving on to my point here. You were talking about how we should have responsibility on the rest of it, but what you're proposing is a blanket rule, right? Now, we should have individual responsibility for what we say. So if what we say is inflammatory, we should be held accountable. That is our sense of responsibility. By saying responsibility as in we all have a responsibility for each other, what we say, all the rest of it, creating a blanket rule, I think it's very wrong, and I think it's an incorrect interpretation.
Okay. If David Cameron tomorrow drew Mohammed, would you say that's an acceptable thing for the Prime Minister to do?
No.
Hold on, no. You can come back to it. Yeah, go on. Would you say that's an acceptable thing for the PM to do?
I don't have to agree with someone what they say in order to recognise their right to free speech.
Okay, so just go on a little bit further. Why would you not want him to draw him?
Craig, you can't have back and forth.
I thought we allowed it on the floor debate now.
No.
I just made it up in my own head. Okay.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Sorry. You can't
Okay,
respond to his point because he goaded you into it.
Could you repeat it? Sorry.
I was just saying, why would you not think that's an acceptable thing for him to do?
But you see, that is a subjective point. That's subjective personal to me. That's my interpretation. Now, I'm not going to make an objective statement or an objective argument about what I feel about something. You know, that's
okay. So you never answered my question. But the point was that the reality is the accountability of the PM during Mohammed could end up disastrous. Right, we could end up in some all-out war, right, with the PM during Mohammed. Now, I'm just trying to say, imagine he did, and it went on the front page of the Times or the Tory graph, and we end up in some dire situation. Okay, very sorry. But basically, I'm just trying to say we all do have accountability. Now, my accountability isn't going to be as severe as the Prime Minister's. I'm not saying it is. But every single one of us does have an actual accountability to what we do in our life. Okay, and we need to accept that with the decisions that we are making. Okay, and that comes with the responsibilities. Yeah, I shouldn't have used the word versus. I just like conflict. So I'm always going to do that. But the reality is we have to be looking at the accountability, we have to look at the repercussions, and we have to take our responsibilities with our rights. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And with the proposition, like to respond?
The answer to the question, would it be okay if he did that? It probably wouldn't. He wouldn't be the best. It probably wouldn't reflect the best on him as a Prime Minister. But yes, he has every right to do that if he wants to do that.
Okay, and do we have any points on the motion? So not proposition, opposition? Yep.
I'd just say there's been really good points made on both sides, which is why it's why debating is complex. That's why I think some people go basically it comes down to this or essentialism. And when you essentialise it, the reason we're discussing it is because it's complex. And it's can't be solved easily. But just something I think as we're talking about Charlie Hebdo, one thing which wasn't addressed I think is just unequal power. And I think it's more about when people were saying Charlie Hebdo was okay, they made fun of the Pope. It's making fun of the Pope isn't the same as making fun of Muslims. It's where the power comes from. Us making fun of the monarchy is fine, but the monarchy making fun of poor people is insane. So I think it's where the power comes from, and unequal power, which comes from that, where it's that's why it's not right to draw Mohammed. And
To address your point slightly, so you say there's an unequal power, and you're right, in the sense that if I draw the Prophet Muhammad, I'm liable to get shot, bombed, anything else. One of the points that I was trying to think if it was which one. I think it was you specifically, Emily, was this is trying to make it a you or a them and us. But I ran through a series of very offensive things, and you said that they're in society we're not allowed to say a series of different things. What I said there was much more offensive than drawing Mohammed when it got towards the end. But I can say that without the fear of reprieve. And this is the key tenet of this entire debate, that everyone is trying to pretend as if our actions would elicit anywhere near a similar response. you should never have to fear violence because you drew a picture, and that should be the end of it.
Would opposition like to respond?
Yes, that's a response to that. All of the things you said at the start of your speech, while you're perfectly right to say them, I wouldn't say them in a casual conversation and mean them seriously and go up to someone and think, I think that this and this, and like the entire list you went through. I think it's perfectly legal for you to say it, and it's within your right to say it, but you still probably would not do it. If we have to have the motion on saying this house would actually say that Hitler was a Zionist, we probably wouldn't, because we had the common sense not to say this, we had the common sense to know that this would offend a lot of people, that this would be counterproductive, and it would just generally not make us
so it's like I said
perfect next. So even though you perfectly have the right to say it, it doesn't actually respond to what the motion is about. We would actually do this. And it's not good to actually do it.
Okay, any questions for the proposition? Yeah.
I would point to Mr. Gallagher, the blonde. Yes, you. Would you be at all offended by the 19th century Punch cartoons of the sort of average Fenian as being a leprechaun, dressed, effectively a monkey dressed as a leprechaun? And is that not effectively beating a different dog with the same stick? I think Craig made a very strong point in that regard. People holding higher standards for themselves, because there's no virtue in being offensive, purely offensive. The virtue is being subversive, and that to me seems to exist on the spectrum from Dave Allen to Seth MacFarlane. Whereas Dave Allen was subversive, and he did that through enough. He did it from the standpoint of respect and love for his fellow man. He ended each show, even though he's naked, sort of good night and your God with you. Whereas Seth MacFarlane is effectively a check throwing excrement around, beating it with a stick, and is just trying to poke at people and just trying to get some reaction from them.
Okay. No, your answer to the first part of that was yes, I would be offended by those pictures being drawn if I was around at that time. But by no means would I expect any restrictions on anyone to reprint them or to depict anything like that. No, I would not call for any restrictions on that. And if that's what they want to do, I would think badly of them. I would put an argument across to oppose what their view is, but no, I would not call for any sort of censorship at all. No. And in answer to your other thing, I mean, what we're dealing with here is simply the drawing of Muhammad. There's no narrative that is necessary or anything. It doesn't have to be insulting. It's literally just the picture of Muhammad is what we're talking about depicting here. We're not going to get bogged down on how he should be portrayed or anything like that. And that's the fact that even that is offensive. Even Majid Nawaz, he tweeted a picture of Muhammad and Jesus saying hello to each other. And that got more death threats. He got 10,000 death threats or something from it. I mean, that we're not even getting bogged down, so I don't want to touch on that. But well, there you go. I don't know. But yeah, so hope that answers it.
One of the things that I never got to say, I'm kicking myself for it, is one of the differences between Islam and Christianity or Protestantism is that respect is a fundamental pillar. And so when you offend them, it's like if you go out of your way to actually make fun of, a deity or a figure, you're offending them on two levels: the principle and then the fact that you're going out of your way to disrespect their religion is an offense in itself. So you said it's just about a picture. They can't get over. It's just the picture, but it can't be about the picture. It's not just about a picture. It's about. No, it's not. It's just saying it's about a picture is missing the broader picture of this debate, because you're making it just about a picture and you're intentionally disrespecting a body of people. And yes, you've said, obviously, I can't say that 1.6 billion people. I can't say that 1.6 billion people will be offended by this, and Shiites also are much more flexible on this. But you're by default saying, well, if it's not all of them, then it's practically none of them. Like you're not having any accountability for the fact that you are offending a huge population, and you don't get it because our culture doesn't allow for the same kind of offence that it would be to do this intentionally offensive thing in Islam.
No.
What about him?
No. No. Just because Craig doesn't mean it's okay.
That's what nonsense. Craig jumped off a cliff.
Anyway, any questions for the opposition?
We've sort of done a good job skipping right over whether the House should, could or would draw Mohammed and talk a lot about why or why not. Maybe we should realise that we can and people have several times with no threat to our livelihoods. So the question I would really put to you is, what do we do to protect the rights of people who are actually at risk when they use, and not just Charlie, people, many of them losing themselves. What do we do to protect the rights, their rights to free speech, when they use satire to try and rebel against religion in their society? We haven't talked about that.
Okay, well, that is, I think you've really got it there, because remember when I was talking all about like, oh, it's our principles versus them, and I was trying to say we're not actually representing our principles, but what you're saying is when we actually do have to stand up for the fact that that we have an oppressive regime that combines church and state and abuses human rights. The issue there is not whether we draw Muhammad. That is a huge, huge problem in society that you're not tackling by drawing Muhammad. You're not getting through it at all. All you're doing is disenfranchising a huge population of people, and you're not bringing with you any of the tenets of freedom and human rights. What I'm saying is, for that, we need a completely different debate. We need completely different means of getting to that solution, but it's not through this.
It's not mutually exclusive. They are both connected. One is a symbol of the other. The depiction of Muhammad is tied up in so much church and state, being joined together. That sort of issue, like it's become a symbol of that. Like it's become a symbol of a lot of people around the world. People from within authoritarian regimes such as Saudi Arabia and Iran and stuff. So yeah, it is completely connected. The two. You can't separate the two.
Any points on the motion?
Okay, so I think what we've got here is we've got 6 non-Muslim people sitting around the table debating the pros and cons of drawing Muhammad. And we're talking about how many people need to be offended by something before we actually, do something about it. So my question is, how many people do need to be offended before we do something about it, and how do we set that standard of offence for doing something about it or changing something?
We keep skipping over something here, which is how many people need to be offended? What constitutes a valid offence? And when you need to do something about it. I'm offended by boy bands, but I don't expect anyone to do anything about it. If I say that gay people deserve the right to get married, I know for a fact there are people in the DUP who will be offended by it. Boo, frickety who. And so what is a valid offence? Is this one? You're quite right, actually, that there isn't as much Muslim representation on this table as there could be. Well, yeah, no, there could be more. That's my point. Like one on the opposition, for example, that would be interesting. But why? Just is an offence validated merely on the case of numbers? That would be the question I'd put back.
I suppose we actually don't think that it's only validated if there's a certain amount of people offended. And I think that actually works really well with our case, because our case is basically saying, if you have the right to say something, but in this specific situation you have to evaluate, is it actually going to offend someone? If I'm speaking to someone who would be offended if I would draw Muhammad, it probably would not be very nice of me to actually do that. Specifically, and this is the second thing, which I forgot to mention in the speech as well. Like, a lot of these cartoons actually are not about showing, okay, we think that this is someone who had a lot of influence on a religion and his ideas might not be ideas that we agree upon. A lot of those pictures are, for example, the Prophet Muhammad having sex with a goat, right? Those pictures exist as well. So it's also the way in which you actually do this and the way in which you talk. So we think that that's also very much present in how you actually determine whether something is offensive, right? Because obviously the second one is going to be a lot more offensive to a lot more people than the first one is going to be.
And then you have goats in the
The image of David Cameron having sex with the pig is pretty offensive too, but we're not allowing him.
Okay, I think we'll go to a vote now, just because it's getting closer and closer to it. So the first vote is based on your personal opinion, so what you actually believe, and everybody can vote in this. And so the motion is this house to draw Muhammad. So if you agree with this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and if you disagree with this motion, please raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
Go 10, go 11. Make it even.
10 or 11?
Go 11, make it even. Good story.
Really good at math. And if you've got no opinions on this motion, for whatever reason, just kind of say, meh. Yeah, okay.
6.
Okay, so it seems to just be kind of even between these two sides based on personal opinion. Don't know if you find that kind of interesting. Okay, and the next vote is the binding vote, if you will. It's based on speaker performance. Now, only members can vote in this, so please take out your membership cards, because I don't know all of our members this year either, so you're really going to have to take them out this time.
Can we have a full house vote tonight?
On what basis?
I'd like to get full representation of the people that heard the debate.
Yeah.
Right, just because you spoke in a debate doesn't
Are we all okay with that?
Aye.
Why don't you just get some rules of policy?
Let's vote.
He just enforces them. Okay, everyone can vote in this because Craig has spoken. So everyone who thinks that the proposition...
Yeah, vote on it.
Yeah, vote.
And don't let non-members vote in that vote.
That's a good amendment to my proposition.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, get in the library.
Okay.
We're having a members only vote. A members only vote to decide if non-members can vote.
Oh my god, I can't believe you're on council. Okay, only members voting on this.
This is why
okay,
you're
have you got your membership
This
cards?
is why you're undefeated.
No. Well, you better. In like 2 seconds. Once I finish saying the sentence, you better have it. Oh, no, not have it? Oh no. Okay.
Yes, by the way.
Yes, I know.
Yes,
I got you covered, don't worry. Okay, so members who think everybody should be able to take part in the binding vote tonight, please say aye and raise your membership cards. Okay. And those of you who don't, please raise your hands and say nay.
My own debating partner is sticking her finger up at me.
Yeah.
I also have 12 peasants on my land, so you can count them.
Yes, well, your 12 persons are members. Okay, that motion passes. Unfortunately. So everybody can vote. Okay, so everyone who thought that the proposition spoke best tonight, please raise your hand and say aye.
Just looking for first.
Proposition.
Yeah,
You're right.
if you remember.
7, one present.
Yep. And those of you who thought that the opposition spoke best tonight?
I would have voted with you. I was just trying to keep
It's like voting for yourself.
They would
I
be
shouldn't be bad.
just
10, one present.
No.
And 12, yeah. 12.
Okay, and those of you who
Still undefeated.
think that they either both spoke really well or really badly, raise your hands. Yep. Okay, so the opposition wins tonight. Just a reminder, need speakers for next week, so if you want to... Hey! Good! If you want to speak next week, please sort that. No. No, I don't think anyone wants to hear that. Where are we? Okay, it's to the corner now, so all these who want to drink, go. Yeah, we can